The debate over the controversial Basic Education Laws Amendment, or BELA Act, is heating up. Solidarity has expressed its preference for a political resolution to disagreements over clauses 4 and 5 of the Act, but hasn't ruled out pursuing a legal challenge. The group is now also calling on President Cyril Ramaphosa to ensure that recommendations from Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube and the Nedlac consultations are fully considered before moving forward. To further expand on this, let's now welcome Professor Brahm Fleisch. He's a Professor of Education Policy in the Division of Education Leadership, Policy and Skills at the University of the Witwatersrand. Professor, always great having you with us. Good afternoon. So the impasse that the contested parts of this bill has now led to are really unfathomable. What is your expert assessment as well as opinion of how and where all parties involved could have erred?
So thank you very much for having me, and recognizes that many people are starting to move off and the questions of schooling are not high on the agenda. I think it's important to recognize that while much of the energy and effort focuses on the controversy around Section 4 and 5 of the BELA Act, the BELA Act has many other important provisions, and I'd like to showcase them today because I think they're often getting lost in the debates about admissions and language. So the BELA Act provides one of the most far-reaching changes in South African education with the making of grade R compulsory. And there are really big issues that still need to be addressed around the funding of grade R. We know that most children are currently in grade R, but a significant portion are in private grade R provision. And the question often is whether, if children move into the public sector, whether there'll be sufficient spaces, whether the budget will provide for comprehensive grade R provision in the public sector, and what the infrastructure requirements would be for the grade R. I think those are really critical questions that are often not being explored in the media, and I think should be as we explore the implications of the BELA Act.
Absolutely, Professor. Now, that argument, just to bolster your statement there, the opposers, is that the minister does not have the jurisdiction, if you will, to side with Solidarity and Nedlac, as we saw, citing this as a gross overstepping, for lack of a better term, of her duties, and that the stakeholders nationally should have been invited. I spoke to the Gauteng MEC of Education, Mr. Chilwade, who expressed sheer disappointment and fully rejected the outcomes pertaining to this agreement. So this is the statement from the President. It says the agreement between the minister and Solidarity has no bearing in law or practical effect on the inclusive multi-party discussions that are underway on Sections 4 and 5 of the Act. Furthermore, the agreement bears no influence on the President's powers to ultimately take a decision regarding the commencement of the Act. Your reactions to these two scenarios that we're faced with pertaining to the BELA bill. Are we ever going to get the parts 4 and 5 implemented?
So again, unfortunately, I'm not a political scientist, and these are very complex political issues. I'm aware that both sides have really made very strong cases. I'm unfortunately not in the position, it's not an area of my expertise to really to comment on either position or the process that's unfolded at the moment. That said, I think it's really important that we recognize the range of different changes that have been initiated in the BELA Act, and in large part, for most of the provisions of the BELA Act, there's consensus. So there's quite a narrow band of disagreement, but there are many changes in the BELA Act that will have far-reaching implications for our schools, that have reached consensus as a country between all the various stakeholders in the system.
And of course, Professor, let's dwell on that then. I mean, if you're listening to it from the various political heads, they've given this narrative that the issue, the bone of contention there is that basically, yes, I understand you saying you're not going to comment on the political side, but they're saying that the DA will not budge on their point or belief that the SGBs need more power, or that things should stay as they are in terms of how the type type of powers that the SGBs have, whereas the opposing side is saying the contrary, saying this is not going to take us forward in terms of getting access to our children, particularly when we focus at the history of our background as a country, looking at issues of racial conflicts and so on. So this could be the place where a lot of people feel that it does not work either way for either one of them.
So, look, the issues of admission and language are clearly very sensitive, and people feel very strongly about them. My own view is that the provisions of Section 4 and Section 5 follow very closely on the Constitutional Court judgments that have been handed down over the last 15 years, particularly the judgment related to Rivonia Primary School and the judgment related to Law School Potgietersrus. In the Potgietersrus, the judge, the deputy judge president or deputy head of the Constitutional Court, Justice Moseneke, made a very important point. Although the court in that judgment ultimately found in favor of the school, Justice Moseneke made the point that the obligation of the school governing body in relationship to language is to think about the best interest, not necessarily exclusively related to the children currently enrolled in the school, but the broad interests of the children in the community. And that spirit of that judgment has obviously been incorporated into the decision for Section 5. The Rivonia Primary School case, which was in Gauteng, related to the extent to which the MEC and the head of department have jurisdiction for admission of children to public schools. And obviously, because the Constitution guarantees every child the right to a basic education and makes it the obligation of the MEC to ensure that there's a place for every child, then obviously in that case, there's an obligation on the part of the head of department to ensure that all state institutions are optimally utilized. So there is a history, a background that is important. I think that often the legal cases that ran before the decisions are often not fully ventilated in the debates as they take place currently.
Basically, my sentiments there, Professor, that we've been getting very conflicting and misconstrued messages as to what really, this section or clauses 4 and 5 actually entail. So, moving forward, Professor, a very quick one. How do you think or see this matter being resolved without, of course, getting the minister removed from her position, leaving all that political stuff out of the way?
I think that there are educational issues at stake, and I think we need to be considering what's in the best interest, not just of individual SGBs, but what's in the best interest of all the children of our country, particularly children who are attending public schools.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your input this afternoon, Professor Brahm Fleisch, the Wits University, on the impasse of the BELA bill.